Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members. My name is Brian Guthrie. I'm the Executive Director of the Teacher Retirement System. It's my pleasure to be here this afternoon and to provide you with an overview of our system and what we do. I have a brief presentation that should be in your materials, and then I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. If you look at our slide deck and just go to slide 2, it's a brief overview of our system and the programs we provide. We have 3 main lines of business, and the first, of course, is our pension trust fund, which delivers annuity benefits to our retirees. The trust fund currently stands at a value of about approximately $210 billion. And we now have reached a new milestone in terms of membership of over 2 million members. The distribution of that membership is approximately 1.5 million active members and about 500,000 retirees. One other milestone that we've reached is that we are paying in more than $1 billion in pension benefits per month. Our total payout of pension benefits on an annual basis is about $15 billion at this time. We also manage 2 healthcare programs, the first being TRS Care, which is for our retirees. That serves approximately 216,000 participants. That program has had a long history with this body and with this committee in particular. There were substantial changes made to that program back in 2017. They were very painful at the time, to be quite candid, but I am pleased to say that they have borne fruit in terms of producing what we have today, which is a stable healthcare program. We are not in need of any supplemental funding, as has often been the case in the past. And in fact, we have actually built up somewhat of a fund balance. That is a combination of strong management on the part of my healthcare team. But in addition to that, there have been several changes to the Medicare program at the federal level in terms of what they cover versus what we cover. Bottom line is that with that fund balance, we were able to lower premiums for our Medicare Advantage participants in some cases, by nearly 50% this year. So that was a major milestone and something that I never thought I would actually be able to say to this committee when we were contemplating the changes we were about 8 years ago. Last but not least, we also have an active care program, which serves active professionals in the system. Not all school districts participate, but many of them do. And so overall, we cover approximately 420,000 participants in that program. That program is self-regulating and self-funding in terms of the TRS board actually adopts premiums each year, which are designed to cover the costs of the program. The state does have an initial outlay of funding for that program that flows through the school finance formula. It does not flow directly to us. However, there has been somewhat of a change that you will notice in our bill pattern related to active care this session, and it started last session. Post-COVID, there were federal dollars available to healthcare programs like ourselves to apply for and receive funding for COVID-related healthcare costs. We received that funding in an amount of over $600 million from the federal government in fiscal year 23. When we received it, we consulted with the leadership of the legislature as well as the governor's office, and the joint decision was made to use that funding to hold TRS active care premiums constant in that particular year. So in a typical year, you will see premiums increase by, on average, 5-10%. In that particular year, we did not increase premiums at all. We held them at zero level for that year. But that was using a one-time source of funding. As a result of that, because, as I mentioned, the program is self-regulating, that put us in a position the following biennium where without the provision of additional funding, we would be looking at premium increases on average of about 18 to 25%. There was a decision made by this body, for which our members were very grateful for, to provide supplemental funding to put us on a glide path back to where the premiums should be, because we were basically behind the curve as a result of holding them constant that 1 year. but we would slowly over time increase them to a point where they'd be back to basically normal. The decision was made to provide $588 million in funding last session, and in return, we were able to hold premiums on average to an increase of about 10% per district. That was a 5-year plan, and so the funding that you will see in this appropriations bill, the base bill that you have before you today, there is $450 million included for active care. I want to be very clear because I received this question from the Senate, and I wanted to make it clear here as well that this is the last time that we will be asking for this funding. This will complete the 5-year plan, and it will put us back on track to where we will be able to manage the program as it has been intended, with premium increases that are more normal and will not be so large as to shock the system. There are no questions about that. There's a few other slides with some deeper dive material or information about our particular aspects of our program. As I mentioned, our pension trust fund stands at about $210 billion. I looked at the fund value yesterday. It's at $212 billion. So this fiscal year since September 1st has been fairly volatile in terms of the market. We expect that will probably continue, but we are on the positive side of that, at least currently, and we hope that that will continue. Our unfunded liability stands at about $60 billion, which we can pay out, we will completely pay off over the next 28 years. That means that we're actuarially sound. That definition of actuarial soundness is in statute, and that stands currently at being able to pay off your liabilities within 31 years. And so we obviously meet that. We had a good year last year in terms of investment returns. Nearly made it to 13%, 12.8% was our final number. I mentioned these numbers because we will update them for you as of February 28th. We are required by a rider in our bill pattern to give you an updated actuarial valuation with where the trust stands, basically in the middle of the session while y'all are making your decisions and markup decisions. I can tell you that based upon where we stand now, we will continue to be at a funding period of 28 years. Unless something materially changes with the market, I would anticipate that that would be the case. In fact, I did ask our actuary to do sort of a stress test to, how badly would the market have to do over the next 10 days in order for us to experience a different number. And it would be on the, in terms of a 10% or greater loss. That would then put us in a position where we might go to 29 or 30 years. So the bottom line is we are in good shape, and we believe that the pension trust fund will remain that way for the balance of this fiscal year. The next page, page 4, just shows you how the pension trust fund value has grown over time. You can see that it has generally been on an upward trajectory. It had some volatility and, in fact, a substantial increase between 2020 and 2021. It dipped a little bit after that, but now we're back on track to continuing to increase. We have an assumed rate of return of 7%, and you can see over the 1, 5, 10, and 20-year periods that we have exceeded that level. We will sometimes, like, for example, if I were to show you the 3-year number, that was a negative number. We did not meet it over a 3-year period. But as I like to say, and I've said this body in the past, we're in the forever business. We want to earn that 7% return over time. And that is exactly how we design our investments and our portfolios to make sure that we balance our risks with the obvious return that we need to earn for our members. Page 5, I think, puts that into perspective in terms of just how important our investment returns are to a fund like ourselves. The TRS Pension Trust Fund was created in 1937, so we're approaching 90 years of existence. And as a mature pension fund, most of our benefits are being paid out by investment returns. If you look, House Bill 1 is filed, includes $6.4 billion in state contributions to TRS. You can basically double that amount from what we receive from members. So, another $6.4 billion from members. So that's about $12 billion over the biennium that we will receive in contributions. However, we pay out in excess of $31 billion over that same time period. That is just the mark of a mature pension fund like we are. TRS Care does receive contributions from the state. Those are also included in House Bill 1 as filed. They total about $1.2 billion. I've already spoken about the health of that program and where we stand in terms of our costs versus our income. We're in a stable position at this time. And then I just talked about the one more tranche of funding we needed for active care to get us back on track to where premiums will be in the future. That concludes, Mr. Chairman, my prepared remarks. Happy to answer any questions. We also have lots of slides in the appendix as well.
All right. Representative Orr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question has to do with participation. I've got a juvenile justice center in my district. Do the teachers at the Wyndham School District participate in TRS?
No, ma'am. They're part of, the Wyndham School District, yes. Yes, those professionals are an employer in our system.
Okay, and also have Mahia state-supported school or state-supported living center. Are they in your program?
No, ma'am, I don't believe so.
Okay, and are charter schools?
Yes.
And charter school teachers?
Yes.
Is there a difference in the funding between a charter school TRS plan and a public school TRS plan?
There is a difference in the amount that they contribute to the pension fund.
The person themselves or the school district?
The school district. And so let me expand a little bit. So in addition to the contribution that we receive from the state and from members, which is set at 8.25%, we also receive an employer contribution to the fund of 2% of payroll. That 2% is applied differently to charter schools than it is to traditional ISDs. For charter schools, because they are not subject to the minimum salary schedule, they pay the 2% on basically their entire payroll. Traditional ISDs will pay the 2% on any portion of their salaries that are paid up to the statutory minimum. Any amount above that, they do not pay the 2% on. So there is a slight difference in terms of the amount that's contributed.
So charter schools carry more of the burden for TRS payments?
In terms of the contributions they make to our system, they contribute more than traditional ISDs do, just relative to their actual payroll amount.
Okay. Why is that?
I do not have a good answer to that question. It is something that we discovered as well throughout the years as this program was being applied. I believe it dates back to changes that were made, and I believe it was House Bill 3 in 2019 was when this first started, and it has been the case ever since. I do not know the legislative intent behind it. I wish I could tell you, but I don't.
Thank you.
And as a follow-up to that, the 2%, that was instituted in 2017, is that correct?
It was 2013, I believe, 13. Mr. Chairman. And it was originally just for school districts that did not participate in Social Security. Then in 2017, it was changed to include all districts and all employers, except for higher ed.
Thank you. Representative Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hi, thank you for being with us today. So I just had a quick question and really seeking more of a point of clarification. There was a lot of concern from retired teachers in my district and teachers, specifically around SB2, and potentially I'm guessing that it would, have an impact on the amount of people paying into the system, and so worrying about the actuarial soundness or if they would have to increase their contribution. So could you just walk me through that?
Absolutely. Thank you very much for the question as well. I apologize for the confusion that the fiscal note, or we have to do an actuarial impact analysis on any bill that could have an impact on the fund. And unfortunately, that analysis from our actuary did create some confusion. There was a scenario included in the original actuarial report that he provided that was hypothetical, and that was simply trying to illustrate the point that it would be very difficult for SB2 as it currently exists with the projections of the number of students that are projected to leave public education to have a material impact on the fund. What he did say, however, is that if there was a scenario in which the amount of individuals that we cover, of active employees, was materially reduced by 1% permanently, that would have the overall impact of increasing our funding period where it stands currently at 28 years to 35 years. That means that we would be no longer actuarially sound. It does not mean, as I did see in social media expressed, that we would be bankrupt or that we would be out of business. That is simply not the case. Senate Bill 2, based upon the numbers that we have seen from TEA in terms of projected number of students who may move from public education to private education, would not have a material impact on our fund. That's just the bottom line.
All right, Vice Chair Gonzalez.
First of all, thank you for all you do for our retired teachers. We really do appreciate how vigilant the agency is in taking care of them. I kind of want to build a little bit off of Representative Simmons' questions, just because I do think there is a lot of concern, and so I want to make this as simple as possible. So if I show people back home, they understand. When you're thinking about actuarially soundness, and you're making projections, yes or no? But you do use headcount data. Is that accurate?
Yes. Well, we use the number of employees in our system, which
the
is
current number and potential future number, correct?
we build in a projected growth amount in that population. Yes.
And so, regardless of SB2, I think what us as a legislature do have to think about is the fact that our population isn't growing at the same rate. And let's say, for example, there is a shift in less migrant communities here, or less population growth, less migrant communities, and or SB2, there could be an impact on headcount. And if there is an impact on headcount, there could be an impact on the actuarially soundness.
Yes, ma'am. That is correct. What I will tell you is actuaries are notoriously conservative, which we like. I mean, that's a good thing for us.
And we don't want to go back because we've done so much progress.
Right, and I totally understand that, but if you let me explain. So our actuary assumes that there is no growth in active membership on an annual basis. The growth that he does assume is simply in payroll, like for raises, merit increases, whatever the case may be. But in terms of the actual number of individuals in our system, he assumes that it is level. What we have actually experienced over the last decade in Texas is growth in that number. In fact, I listened with great interest to the fact that student headcount has actually remained fairly constant over the last several years. What we have seen in terms of who we cover is an increase in active membership year over year for the last decade, on an average of about 1.5%. That growth is good for us as a pension system. It actually benefits us, but we never assumed that to begin with. We always just wait until the numbers come out and then we see what happens. But what has actually happened has actually been a benefit to us. For example, had we not had that growth last year, the funding period would have been 29 years this time instead of 28. So we saw material benefit from that just for this past year. What that translates into in terms of headcount growth is about 14,000 new employees are being added each year to the system. So when we look at the impact of Senate Bill 2, And for example, in the first year, it's projected that 14,000 students are projected to leave public education to private education. It'd be unreasonable to assume that there's a one-for-one reduction in staff. So we made a conservative assumption that even at a 10-to-1 ratio, that for every 10 students who leave, one less employee would be employed. That would not have a material impact on the pension fund. It would not change our funding levels. It's basically because of the growth that we're experiencing and because of the number of people we cover, 1.5 million total lives, active members, it just doesn't have a material impact in the math.
I appreciate you. I mean, we can all have different opinions about SB2, but I do want our retired teachers to have all the accurate information, and I think that's really critical.
Yeah.
I think what I'm curious about is that there's multiple things happening at one time. The commissioner earlier talked about a decreasing or a stagnant enrollment, birth rate, things like that. So there's not just SB2, there is potentially decreasing and or stagnant population. There is other things that could be coming into play, i.e. migration dynamics. So with all these coming, not just one thing, but a confluence of things, are you also considering that, or is that being considered as you make projections? And I think the only reason I asked this is because it took a long time, and Chairman Bonin was one of the drivers of helping support TRS, and I was part of those conversations, luckily, because of him. And we want that to work.
Yes.
And sometimes are more difficult conversations, but I'd rather have a more difficult conversation in front of everybody.
Of course.
That was a joke. It'd be to be responsible of what might be needed, not maybe in the future.
Yes. So I'm going to answer your question in two ways. For Senate Bill 2, or for any piece of legislation that comes before this body, we look at the impact of that legislation only. We do not take into account the potential for other outside confluence of factors, as you put it, to occur when we're looking at the impact of that. Mm-hmm. We're simply trying to estimate what is the impact of this policy change that's being debated by this body. However, we are, as I said, in for forever business, and so we always have a responsibility, and we do, for every 4 to 5 years, we look at our assumption set, and we look at whether or not it's reasonable to assume, for example, what we do currently, which is zero population growth. We don't assume an increase or a decrease, but if things change over time, and we do see that there are fewer people moving to Texas, or that the population is perhaps decreasing, at some point we will recognize that in our assumption set, and that will impact the actuarial evaluation of our system as a result. But we look at a variety of things. We look at population, we look at payroll growth, we look at the markets and what we expect them to return to us over the next 5, 10, 20 years. And we look at inflation, we look at any number of economic factors as well when we're looking at that assumption set. We don't change that every year, but we do change it every 4 to 5 years when we think it's appropriate to take a step back and look at the whole environment and the whole system holistically.
Okay. But just to clarify lastly, headcount is part of your actuarially soundness determination.
So to the extent that it impacts the number of employees that are covered by our system, yes.
Okay.
But not directly.
I understand. I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Representative Slauson?
Yes, thank you so much, especially this last part of your testimony. I think we are all getting a lot of questions about this. So I want to just be very clear that what I'm hearing from you and that I can relay to constituents who reach out to the office concerned about teacher retirement system is that what you said was SB2 would not have a material impact on our fund.
Yes, ma'am.
And that's accurate. Do you, in your capacity at TRS, are you also receiving these questions and concerns?
We are. We are providing, when someone calls, our practice, and We are very careful not to appear as if we're advocating for or against a piece of legislation. We do not lobby, we cannot lobby, and we do not try to do that in terms of providing information to our members. However, in a case like this, when our members have called, we tell them, the pension fund is sound, we are tracking this legislation, and if you would like more information about the impact of this particular piece of legislation on the fund, we refer them to a web page where we have our actuarial valuation and where the actuarial valuation states that SB2 would not have a material impact on the fund.
Do you know offhand where I've got your website pulled up now. Do you know offhand where that is located on your website?
I don't have the URL at top of mind, but I can certainly get that to you, and I share it with the entire body.
If you would, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, Representative Simmons?
Oh.
Oh,
I think it was the ghost.
okay. Representative Martinez?
Yes, sir, and thank you very much for joining us today. I just have one quick question. If the legislature were to appropriate money for a true 13th check, how much would that be?
I guess I need to know the definition of true, but a 13th check that would just basically be a 13th month of annuity payments. I haven't run the numbers recently, but it would be close to $1 billion.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Representative Howard?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to ask about TRS Active Care to clarify a couple of things. So I understand the 5-year plan here. We're at the end of that.
Mm-hmm.
That's to keep premiums from going above 10%, but they
Yeah.
could go up to 10%.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, that is an important. It's not holding them at zero. It is holding them at a maximum increase or an average increase of 10%.
Yeah, so, and in addition to that, I need to clarify something here that I was told that it was back in 2001 when we set a state contribution for TRS care, active care,
Yes.
and that was $75 a month.
Mm-hmm.
Is that where we still are?
Yes, ma'am.
So all of the increases that have occurred over that period of time in what things cost, we just had a set number. We didn't look at anything percentage-wise or
So
indexed
I will date myself, but I was participated in the development of that legislation
Okay,
back in
good.
2001. I was in a different capacity back then, but there was a lot of concern at the time about the state of TRS care and the fact that it required supplemental funding on a routine basis at that time.
Uh-huh.
And so when active care was being considered as a program, there was a concerted effort on the part of decision makers at the time to make sure that that program would not create the same sort of situation where you constantly had to come back to the
Okay.
legislature and ask for money. So we created this self-funding mechanism. I mean, that was one purpose. The second purpose was to really give small districts and medium-sized districts the opportunity to pool their resources and their market power to command a better rate and a better coverage. And so that was successful. And then the third purpose that came out of that legislation and why the funding didn't come directly to TRS is that there was also school finance questions and debate occurring at that time.
As
And
always.
so, as always, and the decision was made to take that funding and flow it through the school finance formula
Okay.
as well.
Do you think that's still an appropriate way to do that, to have the $75?
Well, I believe that districts are doing the best that they can to provide a full benefits package to their employees. I think that the flexibilities they were given in legislation, and I'm going to get the session wrong, it was either the last session or the session before, where they were able to use more of the money that they received in a more flexible basis, where they could either apply it towards the cost of health care or they could apply it to pay raises, or both. And many districts are contributing more than they are required to. But that being said, the overall floor has not changed. The $75 from the state, the $150 from the district, for a total of $225 per member per month. That amount has been the same since 2003. Many districts pay more than that. Many districts still pay them at that minimum. And
So
just
it is
depends.
something that if we wanted to, we could consider that it's been 2 decades since we set that amount.
It
that
is
we
something.
might want to consider a different amount.
You might want to consider a different amount, and obviously I'm not an elected official and not in your capacity to make policy decisions, but I would posit that if you are going to look at that amount, you may want to look at the overall funding mechanism as well, because so much has changed in school
Okay.
finance in the last 25 years
Okay.
that I think it would behoove you to do so.
Thank you very much.
All right, members, any other questions? No? Thank you very much for being with us this afternoon.
Thank you.